I'm doing great. It's a beautiful evening in Las Vegas, and I'm getting ready to go up to the mine tomorrow.
Ah, the mine. What is this mine?
It's a little gold mine I started about 10 years ago. It had been worked for the last 100 years. It's just a small little operation, but it keeps me out of the bars.
Are you mining helium-3 over there?
I wish.
Yeah, be your own helium-3 baron, as Ron Zorgan puts it.
Yeah, I wish.
Go ahead. Hey, there?
It'd be nice if it had helium-3, but no, it's a little gold mine and should be producing any week now.
Producing gold?
Right, it's a little gold mine.
Just a little one. And how do they go about mining for gold these days? Is it more advanced than it used to be?
There's two ways. Number one is underground and open pit, and ours is open pit. In other words, we just go in from the top and scoop up the ore, and we separate the good ore from the bad ore. We take the good ore up to the mill site and crush it, and then it's mixed in a ball mill in a kind of a slurry, and then it goes across what they call a woofer table, which shakes. It has little reels, and it shakes the heavy concentrate into a little fine lime that goes into a bucket, and then there's two things you can do with the concentrate. You can either sell that or you can refine it. I elected not to get a permit to refine it because it's just too expensive and takes a lot of chemicals, so we're just going to be selling the concentrate.
Now, I'm assuming, based on your experience with the mine there, and it's in Nevada, correct?
Right.
That you recognize the equipment, the view of what that equipment might look like maybe from an airplane.
That's correct.
Yeah, so this kind of leads us all to your original photographs of anomalies in the Copernicus crater on the moon.
That's right, and I didn't really realize what we had found until Ron Zorgan, the infamous Zorgan, came along and started finding the equipment. And when he found the bucket wheel excavator, which was as clear as a bell on that Copernicus photograph that I obtained from NASA, that was really it. And then Skeptic Overlord from Above Top Secret was the one that pointed out that the whole north face of the Copernicus crater looked exactly like a strip mine, which it does.
Okay, now that, just to clarify for the audience, Above Top Secret is AboveTopSecret.com. It's a website on the internet where you can go and discuss various issues, political, fringe, scientific, religious, and they try to maintain a fairly serious environment. And that's where we all met to discuss these topics originally, and that's what John was referring to. Anyway, so Zorgan was the one who pointed this out to you originally.
He was the one. He was the one that I posted the photographs, and they were posted through the owners of Above Top Secret. I had mentioned that I had these photos, and they were too big to send over the internet, and so I mailed them by CD, and they put 5 of these photographs that I obtained from NASA up, and they're extremely clear. They were sent to me probably by accident because they were sent to me in the original Lunar Orbiter format. Lunar Orbiter, as you know, was the series of 5 satellites that we sent to the moon between 1966 and 1967 in order to survey the landing spots that Apollo was expected to land. And what they needed is very high resolution so that they could see exactly where Apollo might land. And so they took thousands of photographs, and they have released them to the public in various different formats, but the original format that was processed on the spacecraft itself was 16 by 20 negative. And I ordered one of these, or I ordered 5 of them from NASA, and one of them was the crater Copernicus. And when I got this I expected, a positive and maybe, 8 by 10 or something like that. But what I got was a 16 by 20 inch negative. And this was like in 98 or 99, 1998 or 1999. And I had no way, and there was no way in Las Vegas to print a 16 by 20 negative. So it took a few years before the technology was to the point where somebody could actually show me a print. I got that done, I think, in 2003 when the technology got that far in Las Vegas I could see a print, and I looked at this thing, and it was fantastic. I mean, there was obvious plumes of vapor or smoke. There was a house or building. There was all kinds of little things. And so I had that photograph for, maybe a couple of years, and then finally I decided to put it on the web at Above Top Secret. And the photograph that I'm talking about was Lunar Orbiter, and I forget the number, but it was scanned in 4 different sections so that we could get the maximum resolution as possible. And when that went on Above Top Secret, first there was a little bit of skepticism, but then Ron and a few others started finding an amazing amount of artifacts. They found buildings, they found the bucket wheel excavator, they found other buildings, they found all kinds of things. It was really exciting. I think this happened in September of 2006, and it went along there. Everybody was finding all kinds of things. And then I remember December 4th was my birthday. I was 64 years old, and this was just a few months ago. And I remember the date because I remember sitting at my desk, and I had an old NASA book called, it was SP-246, and it was Lunar Orbiter photos, or it was photos of Apollo 8, 10, and 11. And I thought, I wonder, those photographs were taken before NASA really got into its mode of airbrushing everything out so the public couldn't see what was on there. And so I remember taking the one photo, and I think it was Lunar Orbiter 1 2089, I'm not sure which one it was, put it in the scanner, scanned it, and put it up on my image program, and it was, of course, a picture of the backside of the moon, and just remember how exciting it was to see the city there. I mean, it was absolutely obvious that there was buildings, there was giant tubes, there was what I call the spaceport, just all kinds of things, and it was just fascinating to see those kind of things. So then I started taking all the pictures of the far side of the moon and scanning them and sending them to Ron and yourself. And the one photo that's a very famous photo taken Lunar Orbiter 1 on one of its first passes on the backside of the moon, and seeing all these mining areas. I mean, there was roads and equipment and things spraying dust all over. And then Ron found the control tower, and just obvious. It was really an exciting time.
Now, Ron said something about the camera that took these original photographs, especially the one of Copernicus that you had. It had a special additional resolution where you could see vast distances without pixelization in the image. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, these were just straight negatives. There was no, they didn't use digital cameras in those times.
Right, there was not such a thing as a pixelization.
Right. So what we did is we could zoom in as far as we wanted and see as much as we wanted. And what NASA did in those times, they couldn't mess around with the digital portion of the photographs. So what they had to do was airbrush. And what they did when they wanted to cover something up is they put on what they call white ejecta. and that was a white material that they claimed was ejecta coming out of the moon, covering certain areas.
And that would be mostly around like craters and those long white rays from the crater center?
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and that's all that is NASA covering up the cities. But because they weren't really adept at it, and because they had no idea in the late 60s that, 40 years or 30 years later, 35 years later, that the average public would have imaging programs that could go right to that stuff and see it clearly. So, of course, the ejecta does cover some of the parts of the cities, but what it doesn't cover, you can clearly see buildings and structures and all kinds of things. And I came across that Zond 3 photo taken by Russia. I think it was taken in 1965, and sent that to you. And it's just amazing how many huge pieces of structure there are on the backside of the moon.
Oh, very interesting. Yes, very interesting. And that kind of ties into the remote viewing data that you had. Have you established that the remote viewers who saw the structures on the far side of the moon had they generally determined that it's us or them?
No, the guy that did the best part, I'm at a loss now. What was his name? Do you remember? The guy that was originally involved in the Stanford University.
Oh no, I know absolutely nothing about remote viewing. You are my first introduction to the concept of remote viewers.
I'll remember his name in just a second. He wrote a book called Penetration, and he was quite specific about the stuff that he remote viewed for a secret government agency. And he saw all the stuff that we saw, and they included giant bridges that appeared to go nowhere. In other words, it looked like a bridge, but then it would stop halfway.
And what was covering it? What was
Pardon?
covering the other half of the bridge?
Something may have been covering, but he saw giant equipment, giant what appeared to be lighting fixtures, all kinds of interesting stuff, and just more or less confirmed what Ron and I had seen.
Wasn't he the one, though, the Penetration, wasn't that the book that is selling on eBay for like $800?
Yeah. Amazon.com, I think it's upwards of $400 or $500 for a copy, and I got one and read it, and it was just enthralling to read that this guy was seeing it, and this was, I think he wrote the book in the late 80s about some remote viewing he had done in 1976. And so, we're talking about stuff that he had remote viewed 30 years ago, and we were just finding out about it.
Oh my goodness! Now, see, this is just a whole new concept to me. I'm not even remotely familiar. I can't imagine that it's been established to the point where $800 for one book. That's amazing.
Well, it certainly was worth it, and I'll remember his name in a second. I've got it over on the table. He did see some amazing things, and so we have confirmed it. And it's no wonder that NASA is trying to keep this a secret because, we've been led to believe that the moon is airless, that gravity is 1/6 that of Earth. It's a desolate, barren kind of thing, and that's not true. The moon, the other side, I'm not talking about the side that we can see. As you know, the moon is in rotational lock, which means one face of the moon faces Earth at all times. Well, that's pretty much barren, and there is a lot of stuff on that side, but most of the real cool stuff is on the other side, and there's lakes, rivers, vegetation, people living up there that look very similar to us, but a lot more advanced than us, and huge cities. Now, what they're doing there, I don't have the slightest idea. I do know that we have been going to the moon since 1962. The NASA programs of Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, the Space Shuttle, Space Lab, all that was just a cover. It was a cover for what's really going on. We've been going back and forth to the moon since 1962. We've been had a base established on Mars since 1966. The population of Mars is about 600 million. The people look almost identical to us, but far more advanced. Most of them live underground because of some climatic disaster that happened there that took away most of the Mars atmosphere. There still is a thin atmosphere there, and you can still breathe on Mars, but it's not as thick as that we have here. Same thing goes for the moon. There is an atmosphere on the moon. It is breathable. It does hold, the sky is not black as NASA would have you believe. It's probably blue. It could be yellow. I'm not sure exactly what the color is, but there's atmosphere up there, and you can breathe for a short time without supplemental oxygen.
Now, that's interesting. There was a movie that came out not long ago called Total Recall that had that premise, that Mars had a blue sky and a breathable atmosphere.
Yeah, well, Mars definitely has a blue sky. I've seen the original or actual photos of the video imaging that came into JPL, and what they do is they change that to red so that everybody thinks it's the sky is red or pink on Mars, but the daytime sky is definitely blue, very similar, almost identical blue to here on Earth.
Just so our listening audience understands how you would have this information, John Lear is the son of the man who developed the Learjet, and he was a pilot in the Air Force?
No, I was a commercial pilot. I flew for about 40 years. I retired in 1999. The last job I had was flying a Lockheed L-1011 for Kitty Hawk International, and they went bankrupt, and I retired then. I was 3 years short of being 60, which is mandatory retirement anyway, but all throughout my career I had a chance to fly some very interesting airplanes, and I flew all over the world, and it was just an interesting time. I didn't learn anything during my flying career about any of the stuff we're talking about now, UFOs, the moon, nothing. It was a straight pilot's career. Only towards the end of my career did I start to get interested in this, and it was by picking up a book written by Bud Hopkins, and the book was called Missing Time. And I remember reading that. I think I picked it up at a friend's house here in Las Vegas, and I looked at this thing. I looked at the title, and I thumbed through it, and I said, "Can I borrow this?" And he said, "Yeah." And I read that, and when I read it, I felt, this is real. This is really going on. It was about abductions. And so I started looking into this stuff, and at that time, I thought, because of the stuff that the government and the military puts out about UFOs are not real, I thought I'd tell them, hey, you guys, it's real. It's really going on. It turns out they knew it all the time, but that's not what they tell the public. I got really interested, met a lot of different people, went on a lot of different trips to get this information, and that's how it all started.
One of the things I've noticed that is that a lot of people say that what was that program that came out that did the research on whether or not it would be a good idea to release this information to the public concerning extraterrestrial visitation and abductions, the reality and the UFO question, where they made the decision not to release it because they said there would be mass panic?
Yeah.
The Brookings report, was it?
That was a study done in 1962, I believe it was, and I'm trying to remember the name of the study. But they did decide that it would be best not to release that information because there was essentially no point. What they did figure out, though, was our society and our economy, in order to operate, has to be based on a wartime economy. In other words, we could not function. Our economy could not grow if we were just had peace all the time and there was nothing to stimulate the economy. So that's why we have war all the time. That was what was behind the Vietnam War. That was what was behind Grenada. All the little wars, Kosovo, all that up into including Afghanistan and Iraq. It's all about the economy. It's nothing about the reasons that they give you.
So the report basically said that we couldn't handle it as a nation. This information.
That it would probably disrupt the economy and probably disrupt life in general. And I'll go along with that. There's a few people, as a matter of fact, a lot of people that would think it's really cool that aliens are here, that we're on the moon, we're on Mars and everything. But generally, for the other 6 billion people on this planet, they really don't need to know this. There are other, problems to deal with. And so that's why they elected to keep it secret.
Okay. I was under the impression that a lot of the UFO community had been led to believe themselves that the problem was that the religious communities would be the first to panic and that they were the most likely to have an impact on this decision. I find that very odd. Almost every person I have spoken to, whether religious or otherwise, has never shown a tendency based on religious belief to agree or disagree or show that they would be panicked somehow. So I thought that was interesting that that particular rumor, if that's what it was, got started, that the Brookings report was basically outlining that religious people would have a problem with it.
Yeah, that was one of the big problems.
Now, see, to me, that doesn't make sense. I know so many people of faith that don't have a problem with the idea that God made other life forms besides humans. So, I mean, in some cases, it's actually very, very biblical. I mean, he created the angels before he created us, so there you go. Yeah. Maybe the angels are extraterrestrials.
Right, and you and I can understand, and the people that we, talk to and converse with and associate with, but we're not talking about the other 6 billion. The other 6 billion that, live day to day, hand to mouth, they have big problems, and they don't need to know about all of this stuff that's going on.
But then, why would the UFO movie industry be so popular if that weren't something that people actually enjoyed listening to, learning about, and speculating on?
Oh yeah, we all get a kick out of it, and it's all presented, as possibility. And that's part of the program. They're not suppressing it entirely, but Steven Spielberg came out with Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and we were all, happy to learn about these, these little people that all they wanted to do was phone home, and that's all to keep us occupied.
That's cute. Phone home. E.T. phone home. So when you were when you received the photographs that you shared with Above Top Secret, did you have the original impression that what you were looking at had something to do with mining, or did that not actually come up until Zorgon found the equipment?
It didn't come up until Zorgon started finding the equipment, and at AboveTopSecret.com, one of the owners there, Skeptic Overlord, posted one of the photos, and he said, "Hey, wait a minute, this looks like a mining operation. This looks like a strip mine operation." And it really did, because there's all kinds of levels. It's obviously been mined. I mean, this is nothing that could happen naturally on a crater wall. Somebody dug this out. There's
right, because there's a difference, I noticed in the photographs, of color. The area that has been mined is a different color than the on the same crater wall.
Yeah.
And you can't really attribute that to the light. And the light is evenly spread across the whole area.
Yeah.
So another thing I noticed while I was looking at the photographs, that there appeared to be a lot of cloudy, like cloud-type cover over many of the things. And I was trying to determine if that was what they referred to as lunar regolith, or if it was some form of, like you were saying, around the craters where they'll have something they call ejecta that really isn't ejecta. It's
now, which photo are you talking about?
Oh, almost all of them.
Oh, all
but
of them.
Especially the 4 or 5 Copernicus photographs. I noticed there was a lot of cloud cover. That's what I called it, because if you look at the photograph and some of the areas close up, you can see what look like buildings peeking out from between this white misty stuff that in some cases it actually looks like a layer of bumpy white material that's been painted over top. And in other cases it actually looks like clouds.
Okay, now it could be either. There are definitely clouds on the moon. There's no doubt about it. There's both clouds and fog. But the specific white stuff that covers some of these buildings and stuff, that was put in by NASA. And when you say regolith, that's just a fancy name for moon soil.
Right, the moon soil, which I did a little study on this myself along with Zorgon when we were researching for the Living Moon book, which is a book that yourself and the Pegasus Research Consortium are putting together on this very topic. It'll be coming out soon. And one of the things we were looking into was why it seemed that there were so many grid patterns on the surface of the moon that looked artificial, but you couldn't actually see details on any buildings. And we were trying to determine, is this because we're at such a great distance in the photograph from the actual surface, or is it that there's painting on the negative that's hiding it, or are they actually burying these things in lunar regolith to protect it from electromagnetic radiation and neutrino bombardment?
No, I don't think there's any radiation. The lines that you see in some cases, they were where cities are or used to be. For instance, in the area north of Ukirt that they call the area of Los Angeles, that's an area with rows and rows and rows of what are apparently streets. Now, we can't get a photograph that you can see this stuff because NASA's taken very good care to be sure that we don't. But there are all kinds of places around the moon that do have these regular patterns. I don't think they're covering up anything. It's just where they mined or dug those trenches for some particular reason.
Okay, so now the Ukirt is a crater.
Right.
Right, a crater on the moon.
Ukirt is the crater. If you look dead center of the moon, just a little bit north, sometimes it appears as a equilateral triangle. We've looked very closely, and it could appear that, but it's generally just a regular crater.
So are you under the impression that the majority of what we're seeing up there now is new, or do you believe we have a mixture of old and new up there?
Old and new what?
Old and new anomaly, old and new buildings, old and new constructs.
Yeah, it's. I think it's all the stuff we've seen is relatively new. I would say, in the past couple of hundred years, there's an attempt by NASA to say that there could be an ancient civilization because they don't want anybody to think there's anybody up there now. They don't want anybody to think there's people mining there now, and so they refer to ancient civilizations. But there's people up there right now. You can look at that Copernicus photograph that's on AboveTopSecret.com. It's in the thread called John Lear's Moon Photos. Take a look at it yourself. I mean, there's machines that are raising dust. There's vapor rising from it yourself. I mean, there's machines that are raising dust. There's vapor rising from huge containers, cylindrical containers. That's just going on right now. This wasn't an ancient civilization. This is going on right now.
Definitely. I've seen it myself firsthand, so I know that you are not pulling our leg. To call in and talk to John Lear, by the way, the number is 1-646-652-2917. At 646-652-2917. Feel free, call in and ask him any questions that you have on your mind. John is a wealth of information. One of the impressions I got while I was looking at it was that there was something very ancient there, and there was also something very new there. I have seen the bucket wheel excavators kicking up the dust, as you say, and I've seen some very old bucket wheel excavators that look very decrepit, as if they've been out of commission for a long time.
That could be, yes, that very well could be.
And I think the reason why we're seeing the bucket wheel excavators is they're so enormous. They're not small mining equipment pieces.
No, there's huge equipment up there, and I had the great fortune. As a matter of fact, let me take this break here. I just wanted to say hello to my daughter, Allison Lear. I know she's listening. Hi, Allie. About a few years ago, I had a chance to talk to a real bona fide government insider, and it was the only one I ever got to talk to. He didn't have long to live, and he didn't tell me a lot. He was still abiding by his sworn oath of secrecy, but he did give me a few hints. And one of the things he told me was that he said, John, I worked on a piece of mining equipment down south, and he named the state, I forget what it was, Alabama, Arkansas, someplace down there. It was way out in the middle of nowhere, and they were building a huge piece of mining equipment. And he says, John, when we got through with the thing was so huge, and I think he mentioned something like 30 or 40 stories, and it covered several acres. And he said it was so huge that as the program came to an end and it was almost finished, he said, I rented an airplane and at the local airport just to fly around and look at the enormous construction that we had built, this enormous piece of mining equipment that was going to the moon. And I said, wow, fantastic. I said, how did they get it there? And he says, I don't know. And that's how compartmentalization works in the world of secrecy. In other words, he built the equipment, but they wouldn't tell him, how it was going there. That wasn't his need to know. His need to know was the fact that, that he had to build the equipment. And the other thing he told me was the fourth astronaut that was killed in the Apollo 1 accident on January 27th, 1967, when Grissom, White, and Chaffee were killed. There was a fourth guy in there, and the fourth guy was down there by the under the seats, and they would place a guy there to help them through the practice countdown. Now, this was, of course, several months before the actual launch, but they had a lot of problems to work out, and they would do these practice countdowns, and they would put the fourth guy in there to help them sort out the problems. Now, normally it was Joe Shea, and Joe Shea was the guy that was head of ASPO, the Apollo Space Program Office, and but he wasn't there that day. It was another guy. And when the fire occurred, the National Security Agency, who was in charge of everything there, cordoned off the area for 45 minutes while they took the fourth astronaut out and took the body. And then they let NASA in there to deal with the bodies of Grissom, Chaffee, and White. Now, the reason they took the fourth body out is because he was part of the secret astronaut team. He was the one NASA's Secret Astronaut Corps that was established the same time as the astronaut corps that we know about, but they're the ones that did the flying, went to the moon in 1962, went to Mars in 1966, and throughout the solar system. And what they couldn't afford was for the public to find out there was a fourth guy in there, because they would want to know who he was, where he came from, and what he was doing. So that had to be kept as a secret forever and ever, and that's why they took that body out. And that's why the public never learned that there was a fourth astronaut killed in that fire January 27th, 1967.
So we have a secret astronaut program.
An astronaut corps, secret astronaut corps, and that's what Gary McKinnon stumbled on. He was the guy that lives in England that accidentally stumbled on to the list of NASA's secret astronauts. And that's why he's being prosecuted. That's why they're trying to extradite him to the United States. And that's why they plan to give him 70 years in prison. And they're saying because he hacked into a secret government computer when he didn't. He didn't actually hack into it. He didn't use any secret codes. He just went into places where you normally don't go, and this one place didn't need a specific password or anything, and he saw this list of the secret astronaut corps, and of course that irritated the powers that be, and that's why they're being so harsh with him. They don't want anybody else to do that.
Okay, we have a caller. Let's see what he has to say, or she. Hello, you're on Each and Future Radio. Who is this?
Hi, John, you guys. How you doing?
Fine, how are you?
This is Mitch from Michigan.
You have a question for John or a comment?
I was just tuning in, seeing what you guys were discussing tonight.
Yeah, we're talking about the moon, the pictures on the moon. We're talking about the cities that are up there and how we accidentally discovered them and how you can find them on the pictures on above.secret.com.
And there's cities on the moon now?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't hear that one.
As a matter of fact, I did the George Norrie show here a few months ago, and I prepared 25 photos for C2C, Coast to Coast. And it's amazing that every once in a while, as a matter of fact, maybe a couple times a week, they put those pictures up. If you go to...
You wouldn't have to link to that, do you? I'm actually got my browser right in front of me.
What they do is before the show starts, they actually put these 25 photos up there, and there's photos of the cities. You can see the spaceport. You can see tubes. You can see perfectly constructed buildings there. Some of them are pentagon-shaped. Some of them are round-shaped. But if you don't see it there, you can go to above.secret.com, go to John Lear's moon photos, and go through that thread. Now, I think it's 100 pages long now, but you can go through there and find all those pictures of the cities on the backside of the moon.
Or you can go to thelivingmoon.com. It's thelivingmoon.com. And all of or not all, but a lot of the photographs have been arranged into categories there for you to look at.
All right, I'm looking at one of them. Where's the one you said where it zooms right in? You can see tubes and stuff.
Which one are you on?
I'm looking at the one right on the Living Moon front page under the unicorn. It says Proudly Presents, and then it's showing a picture here.
Oh, okay. Just click on the book cover and go to the side.
Right down. All right. Oh, that's the old face. We've all seen that. Those verified? Are they, you guys got two of them, or there's more down farther? Huh?
It's more down, yes. There's
now, if you're at, Mitch, if you're at Pegasus, it's on the livingmoon.com?
Right, thelivingmoon.com.
It's a very interesting picture right at the beginning where it says Pegasus Research Consortium proudly presents. If you'll get to that page, I'll show you a picture of Aristarchus. Aristarchus is on the side of the moon that we can see. It's the brightest object that we can see. This object has been whited out for time immemorial by NASA and everybody else that has control of any prints.
This is the Living Moon?
The very first page on the livingmoon.com, the cover of the book, the Living Moon cover, has a photograph of it.
Yeah.
Do you see that structure?
I see the Living Moon Forum, the Living Moon Mirror, and the Living Moon Mirror 2.
Right. Well, on the very first page of thelivingmoon.com, when you see right below the picture of the Pegasus horse, you'll see the cover of the book.
Yeah.
That is a picture of Aristarchus crater. That's what it actually looks like on the moon.
That's a nuclear reactor. I believe it's a fission reactor. You can see the blue color around it. The blue comes from radioactive material. The blue comes from radioactive material coming in contact with air molecules.
Damn, I never thought about it like that. It does look like it, don't it?
Yeah. And that's a photo you won't see from NASA.
They're deep in, but to picture that, though, don't you?
What happened was recently...
Is that verified, though? That's not verified.
What's not verified?
That it's holding nuclear material.
No, that's my theory. That's what it looks like.
That'd be all over the news if they verified that.
Yeah, a lot of this would be all over the news.
Would it?
Yeah. So,
but if you click on the living moon and you page down, let's see if I can come up with it right now. I'm not sure where the bucket wheel excavator is. It's a fantastic picture that Zorgon did, and it's just as clear as a bell. I can't find it right now.
Oh, which of the Copernicus images is it in? There's so many. There's page after page of anomalies here.
Yeah, the picture that the place that Zorgon found called the Keep, and the reason he called it a keep is it looks like the operations center, and there's obviously a building there, and the bucket wheel excavator is behind it, and there's all kinds of neat things on there.
Ron specializes in rocks and minerals. Ron is also known as Zorgon. He recognizes a lot of the...
Okay. Here we go. It's if you go to livingmoon.com, go to the next page, you'll see grid map of Copernicus photos, and then under there on the right-hand side, about six lines down, it says the Keep on area Copernicus #1, and you click on that, and then you can go down. You can see the Keep, you can see the buildings,
and the huge excavator.
Yeah, and he's colorized it so that you can see it just operating there on that.
I'm not. What do I click in on again?
Okay, which page are you looking at?
I'm at the second page, Living on the Moon. Second page. Click on the book.
Start scrolling down until you come to the grid map of Copernicus photos. It's under Copernicus Mining Operation Evidence.
Just scroll on down.
I scroll on down, I see a green menu.
Right?
Mining Operation Evidence?
Yes.
All right.
In the second column. It's about the sixth link down. It's called the Keep Area on COP #1.
All right, I found it.
And that whole page has photographs of that area where there's buildings, there's smoke, there's a huge decrepit excavator in the background.
Go down five photos, and then you'll see different size photos of the bucket wheel excavator.
And you'll see other bucket wheel excavators operating, kicking up big plumes of dust around the base where it's digging into the soil.
Yeah, most of these pictures aren't very convincing, though.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. If you haven't looked at these pictures for years and years and years, it's very difficult to see. Some people can't see.
You really have to have a scientific view into it.
Right.
But it's hard to say because I mean, I can honestly probably look at one of these pictures and just with my eyes make something else out that ain't there, you know.
Okay, now what about the one with it's colorized, a pink reddish?
The only one that I find kind of interesting is the one with the image of the wheel.
Yeah.
I find that one the most interesting.
Well, I'm going to...
Ferris wheel, don't it?
Yep, it does. And have you seen the actual photograph of the bucket wheel excavator itself? Or actually, this is the... That's not a bucket wheel excavator, it's a tunneling machine, isn't it?
This is probably something our government's working on that they ain't telling us about.
It's humongous. There's a photograph on there, not from the moon.
Government's working on it they ain't telling us about.
It's humongous. There's a photograph on there, not from the moon, but of an actual tunnel boring machine. just to give you an idea of the size of some of these machines. That one that shows you in the background, scaffolding, that goes up several stories.
It's hard to say, but it's definitely something that makes me look more now that I'm starting to pay more attention.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to put you back
Beth,
on hold.
Beth, I thought we were going to have Ron with us tonight. What happened to that?
Apparently Ron had to work,
okay,
and he
great.
said he would try to get back on time, but he wasn't sure he was going to make it.
Listen, on the new show before this, a guy was doing a thing on UFOs, and I don't know if you guys listened to that show. He had quite a long discussion on different perspectives. Did you guys happen to tune in for that?
No, I didn't listen to that, but most of the UFOs you see today are stuff that we built, that we have, that we're flying. It's not the aliens themselves. They rarely show themselves. You rarely see a bona fide extraterrestrial, so-called flying saucer. All that stuff you see, the Phoenix lights, the stuff in Chicago, the stuff from China, all that is stuff that we made and that we operate. That's not ET.
I tend to agree with him on that because.
What do you mean by you guys made it? What do you mean by that?
It's human construction. Now, it doesn't mean that we didn't get that technology from extraterrestrials, but that our scientists have actually developed without our knowledge, without admitting it, at least to the general public.
We started our construction in 1953, and I think that we worked about 6 years on developing the anti-grav technology. I know that my father was involved in that, and I think by 1958, 1959, we pretty much had a method of anti-grav, and that's what we used for the vehicles that we used to go back and forth to the moon in 1962. And, of course, our technology has increased since then, and we've got spacecraft that can do amazing things. We can't do the amazing things that the ETs can do. They can go hundreds of times faster than the speed of light, but we can probably get to the moon in an hour. We can probably get to Mars in maybe, I don't know, probably 12 hours, something like that. We can really hustle right along there.
Okay, I'm going to put him back on hold. We have another call. Hello? You're on Ancient Future Radio.
Hello?
Hello.
How you doing?
Fine, how are you? Who's calling?
This is Tim in Hudson, North Carolina.
Well, hello.
I would like to ask John a question. It might be slightly off topic, but maybe not. I hope not. As an abductee, what is it that the aliens are really looking for when they abduct humans?
What you need to do, is it Tim?
Yeah.
Tim, what you need to do is you need to go to that above.secret.com and look at a thread by Sleeper. It's called I'm Coming Clean on Extraterrestrials. And he has really a lot of good information that it would really be beneficial to you to read if you are a true abductee. And I'm sure that if you say you are, you are. But you should go to that thread and take a look at it. There will be some very good information for you.
Right. I had talked to Mike Kaiser, and he had hooked me up with Daryl Sims, and I've done a lifelong study on this stuff because it has to do with my family. My dad was head of the narcotics division and policeman for over 25 years, and when he was younger, he saw a UFO that was it was cigar-shaped, and it was about 150 feet long, and no, it wasn't. He said it was about the size of a football field, I'm sorry, and it was about 150 feet above him. And my sister and I both had something that happened to us when I was about 19 years old, and I've pretty much can accept it, but when I try to talk to her about it, she kind of flips out.
Yeah, that happens. You try and talk to
like
people
she has
close.
a screensaver or something. She gets mad when you start talking about it.
Right. Right, and they're abductees themselves. They don't want to remember it, and you don't need not to bring it up to them or force them to, because each one deals with it by themselves on a one-to-one basis. And,
right.
But if you are interested in information, I would go to this thread.
And now you're saying Mike Heiser gave you counsel on that.
Yeah, Michael sent me an email. I emailed him after Artville, and he hooked me up with Daryl Sims, and I talked with Daryl over a week or two on the phone, asking questions and things, and he sent a test to me that I took and sent it back to him and all that stuff.
It's a very controversial topic, and the advice that's given regarding it varies greatly.
Yeah, it sure does. It seems like an ever-ending, just vicious circle that you go into. You seem like you get an answer pretty close to it, and then something else comes up.
Right. Well, I think that for a lot of people, it has been a pretty traumatic experience. I have never personally been abducted to my knowledge, but it does seem that people who do have these experiences are not very happy about it when they start remembering. So to me, this to me sounds kind of fishy, like there's an ulterior motive on the that maybe we don't understand, or maybe we don't have enough information about. I know that Linda Moulton Howe talks about cattle mutilation, and I think that this kind of ties in a lot to the abduction question, because people are frequently violated during these abductions in various ways, not necessarily sexual, but reproductively. Yeah. Like maybe they removed something like an egg or sperm. This is not something that people are gladly giving up without their permission.
The biggest thing that bothered me was that it doesn't fit into a box. It just doesn't fit into a box. Floating across a room just doesn't fit in a box, and you keep going over and over in your mind, but you know it happened to you, but you really don't know how to deal with it.
Right.
And that makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right.
I worked in designing nuclear equipment and had a major place here in North Carolina, and had could go in 676 feet underground and 676 feet above the ground, and but yet that happened to me, and it just, like I said, it just doesn't fit in a box.
No.
You don't know how to deal with it. It's a vicious circle. You keep going back to that night that it happened, and you try to analyze it and try to just to try to figure out, and it doesn't make any sense. And
well, it's interesting that you mentioned, and I wonder what John thinks about this, that you worked in a capacity for, well, it seems like that would be kind of a sensitive, top secret type of information itself, working in the nuclear.
Well, I basically worked in process control. I drew the piping and things that went into it, which was it was something that was really, it made me feel good, you know.
Yeah.
Being a country boy, to be able to work on that kind of stuff, and I thrived on it. But after we finished the construction of it, there wasn't another job to go to, so it just kind of left me hanging.
I wonder if they tag certain people for abduction, and if it's our government doing it or extraterrestrials, or both.
Both.
Okay.
Both. Our government does a lot of abductions, and the ET do a lot of abductions.
Okay, now, how do you differentiate between those two? I think the caller would probably be interested in that.
I don't remember. I read something about it, how you could differentiate, but I just don't remember. I believe that Sleeper was the one that came up with how to differentiate between it.
Well, then that should be an interesting read.
The problem with reading and stuff so much is you have one side saying one thing and another side saying the other thing, and then you have to try to find the truth out there. There's so much stuff that isn't true, and then there is truth, and you have to read it all and try to figure out what the truth is from a lie.
Right.
Does that make any sense to you?
Yes, it makes total sense.
And that keeps somebody like myself that knows something that happened to them, but yet they can't really talk about it because the church don't deal with it. They don't want to deal with it. It's more than they can deal with.
Right.
And I find that a lot of shows out there, they really don't deal with it either. You can't. They tell both sides of it. And if somebody really had just the truth, it would help a lot of folks that's like myself, that are just normal country guys that would just like to know what's going on.
And well, you bring up a good point. Unfortunately, at this juncture, all we can do is offer both sides, or as many sides as we possibly can. And I think in the process of discovery, the more information you have, the more likely you're going to find the rabbit trail.
Right.
Yeah?
Well, I enjoyed the show tonight so far, and I was trying to get it on, to help folks like myself, that have real questions instead of, I don't know how to put it in words. I just called on spur of the moment thing, and I just happened to get through.
Well, thanks for calling.
And thank you very much.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Now, Beth, that's next time we do the show, we're going to have to talk about the work you did on the crater Tsiolkovsky.
Oh, yes, that was very interesting.
And the moon was towed into orbit many thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years ago, placed in orbit in rotational lock by somebody. And the machine that towed it here was stored on the backside of the moon, and you helped find it. And we found it in the crater Tsiolkovsky. It's disguised as an island, which is a pretty good disguise, but you uncovered it, and you found it's a gigantic machine. I think it's the machine that towed the moon into orbit. I don't think you think that, right?
Well, I'm under the impression that if it is a machine that towed it into orbit, that in addition to the machine, they've actually built a mining operation in the same spot, because not only did I see evidence of a bucket wheel, the ground in the area where these clouds of I don't know, I guess they're clouds, mist, steam, smoke, there's a streak of orange along the floor of the crater that you can tell is some kind of a residue, like a rusty residue.
Yeah.
Which suggests scientifically. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, are we coming pretty close to the end?
Oh no, we can go over as long as up to an hour over.
Oh, okay, great.
Yes, continue. It suggests scientifically that the smoke contains rust is only present when you have two things: iron and air.
Right.
So, I mean, what's this rusty streak on the ground? If there's not an atmosphere, and obviously the crater is a good place for iron.
Right.
So I'm assuming that would be like an iron mining operation. That's just my assumption.
Anyway, it's a very interesting, whatever it is, NASA went to a great deal of effort to make that thing look like an island. And they
sure did.
And you helped uncover it and expose it, and several little hints led us to that thing. And I think even NASA themselves made the mistake in little thumbnail photographs they had of not that thing. And I think even NASA themselves made the mistake in little thumbnail photographs they had of not taking the trouble to turn it into an island, not thinking that anybody would enlarge these thumbnail photos. And there it is. It's a huge machine doing something.
Oh, absolutely.
And the same thing, they made the mistake of doing thumbnail photos of areas on the backside of the moon where they didn't take the effort to take the thumbnails, enlarge them, put in the ejectus, the so-called white ejecta, and then reduce it down in size to the thumbnail, so that you can now take the thumbnail, enlarge it, and see these areas that don't have the ejecta that should have the ejecta. Now, of course, you don't get the detail, but what we're proving here is that they use the white ejecta to cover up the cities.
There you go. There you go. It's interesting, too, that these cities are around the craters, and I think this hints at what the craters actually are. A lot of them, I don't think all those craters on the moon are actually craters.
No, they aren't.
And that's interesting, though, that the two things kind of fit together, but it makes sense. Now, if the moon were to be towed into place, let's say it's a Dyson sphere, like that's what this would suggest, that it was originally an artificial body. How would it accumulate this material to mine in the first place, unless it was made specifically for the purpose of attracting space debris.
Yeah.
They could be specifically mined later, almost like a project in the making that would last for a very long time.
Right.
So it would be like a mineral catcher.
Right.
I had never thought of, how would they actually go about using something like that. If it were an artificial body, what would be the purpose of it? I mean, what purpose does it serve the Earth? I know there's a lot of scientific jargon that fits in there, and what does it mean for us? I mean, how does it...
Well, therein lies the question now. On the front side of the moon, right almost directly dead center of the moon is an area called the sinus medi, which means middle cavity. Right in the center of that is an object, artifact, that rises 6 miles tall out of the sinus medi. It's made of a glass-like material that you can't see from Earth, but from the lunar orbiter photos, specifically lunar orbiter 384M, had the sun kind of behind it, so you can see this thing. And there's a tripod, a graceful tripod, that rises up about 5 miles, and then this giant cube or ball that's made up of all these small cubes makes up this huge thing that sits on top of the tripod, and it's a mile in length, width, and height. And we wonder what that is. It's my personal opinion that that thing, and they call it the big soul machine on the moon, that's what I call it. I think that's what handles the souls back and forth from Earth. In other words, when you're born, that thing sends down a soul into a newborn baby, and then when you die, it retracts the soul to send back again. And what they do with it up there, I don't know. But supposedly the Greys run that operation, and they do have underground facilities near and around that thing. And that's one entire operation, and it seems like it's separate from the mining and all the rest of the stuff that goes on there. It's just a real interesting question. Who fits in where? What are those people that look like us doing up there? How far are they advanced? Are they allied with the Greys up there? Exactly what is going on?
The question now, where did you get your information on the possibility that it was a soul collector?
I got really interested in remote viewing, and there was a remote viewer, McMonigal, Joe McMonigal, who was in the Stargate program with the Army. I think it was called Stargate, the one they terminated in 1994. Anyway, he was tasked at one point during the time he was with the government's remote viewing program to find out what happened to the soul after a person died. And he was sent, somebody had a fatal car accident in San Francisco, and he was sent to remote view the soul. And he followed it, and it was going towards the moon. And he says as it got closer to the moon, it appeared to be being wrapped in something. He didn't know what. As he got closer and closer to the moon, he got this message in his mind, and it said, "This is not your place. You do not belong here. Don't come any closer." And but he kept following it until he got real close to the moon, and the message got so loud that he actually felt threatened. He felt his life was being threatened, so he had to break off following this soul. So anyway, that gave me the idea of where the soul was going. When we pass away, our soul goes to the moon. Then Richard Hoagland came up a few years ago with that photo, Lunar Orbiter 384M, that showed that huge thing in the sinus medi. Well, now the moon is in rotation lock at the same thing, faces the same face of the moon, faces Earth at all times. Right dead center, there's this huge 6-mile tall artifact, and it's pointing directly at Earth. So I'm wondering, what could that mean? I mean, what could that be? Is that a transmitter? Is that a receiver? Are they sending down signals? And then when I read McMonigal's story, I thought, oh, I know what that is. That is the thing that collects the souls and does what it processes them and sends them back.
That's a fascinating thought. I don't know exactly what to say.
And then we talked. Then we heard Sleeper on his thread. The first thread that he had was called something to do with extraterrestrials, whatever it was. It was 110 pages long, and I went through the thing, and he started talking about the souls and how we were here. You know that the souls were many lifetimes old. That every one of us has a soul that maybe 60 had been in use 60 times, maybe 100 times, maybe 1,000 times, and it kept being recycled back and forth until it was the perfect soul. And but he didn't mention where it went or where it came from when you died and when you were born. So I figured, well, that's the one. That's the thing in the middle of the moon they call the big soul machine on the moon. That's where the soul goes. And we pressed Sleeper several times to comment on it, and he said, I can't. And the reason he says he can't comment on it, he talks about the little grays and how they have a job to do down here, and how they are responsible for the well-being of the body. They are responsible for the bodies that we have, but they're not responsible for the soul. So he couldn't comment on too much on the soul and where it went and where it came from. Just the fact that it is recycled all the time.
Interesting, very interesting. So, what did Hoagland think it was? I'm a little lacking in information.
Hoagland makes no speculation. As a matter of fact, every time I talk about his name and the thing that comes out of the thing that's in the sinus medi, he wants me to specifically point out that he does not agree that it's a soul machine, and he wants me to make that perfectly clear. So I do. Hoagland doesn't believe that it's a soul machine. He doesn't know what it is.
Okay, well, to each his own. I have at this point I have no theories or hypotheses of what it might actually be. I have a hard time even seeing it. I'm amazed that you found so much detail about it, especially the cube. You say there's a cube there.
It's in the book Penetration.
Does he have photographs of it?
No.
No.
No, there's no photographs. It's only what he remote viewed. And apparently, I have a second or third generation copy of Lunar Orbiter 384M, and I took it off. I grabbed it off a video of Hoagland's. I think it was called the Moon-Mars Connection, and that's all I have. Now, Richard has promised me for the last year or so for a first-generation copy of that photo so that I can see the little cubes themselves, but it has not arrived yet, so I haven't seen it. So I'm just taking the description from what I've read.
We have two guests coming up, Neil Adams and David Sereda, that I really hope you can be present for the interviews.
Yeah, I hope so.
I don't know, are you familiar with Neil Adams?
No.
He has a theory that the planets grow and that tectonic plate movement is a lot different than we're being told. He has videos on it. He's been on the Coast to Coast more than once. It's just interesting as it can be. And he's a comic book artist. He's a famous comic book artist. And so the two things in combination don't, you're thinking, what in this Sam Hill? A comic book artist who just suddenly got this massive theory, and it's very intricate. He's got something like 20 videos depicting a tectonic plate movement, and how he's actually showing that the planets are actually starting off very small, and the spread is a natural growth, like they're growing from the inside out.
Yeah.
It's amazing. He's very interesting, and I think with your understanding of science and space that you might find that interesting. You also are aware of who David Sereda is?
Yeah.
Evidence?
Right.
He did a really good video based on the information collected by a Canadian, was he a TV broadcaster, radio broadcaster in Canada who picked up NASA's secret transmissions?
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting tape that I've seen.
Mm-hmm. It's called Evidence, the Case for NASA UFOs, and he's not exactly fond of NASA either. It's not that we're not fond of NASA. It's more of a case of we're not exactly sure why they're not telling people everything they need to know. You believe
because they work directly for the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense makes all the decisions on what NASA can do or say. They have no authority themselves.
I noticed in a lot of the videos that were taken from the shuttle, the videotapes that were taken from the shuttle, that there was so much activity in space, it was unreal.
Yeah.
I mean, that cannot all be satellites and space debris, space junk. There's got to be more going on up there because, two ships flying next to each other in formation are supposedly two asteroids? Okay. No, I don't think so. So I think he's made a good case for that, and I think that would be a very interesting conversation to hear you and David discuss them. NASA's case for UFOs.
Yeah.
In the meantime, a lot of these upcoming guests like Michael Heiser, Glenn Kimball, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Glenn Kimball.
Right.
Do you know who he is?
But refresh my memory.
Glenn Kimball is one who's done a lot of study on the ancient Americas.
Oh, no.
Oh, and he's got some fascinating information about civilizations in North, South, and Central America, way before, and visitations from other civilizations way before the Europeans got here.
Yeah. I'm not picking up this program on my computer. Are we still on?
If we're not, that'll be available for people to download and listen to.
Oh, okay.
So.
Because it says segment duration 60 minutes. see it clearly. So, of course, the ejecta does cover some of the parts of the cities, but what it doesn't cover, you can clearly see buildings and structures and all kinds of things. And I came across that Zon 3 photo taken by Russia. I think it was taken in 1965, and sent that to you. And it's just amazing how many huge pieces of structure there are on the backside of the moon.
Oh, very interesting. Yes, very interesting. And that kind of ties into the remote viewing data that you had. Have you established that the remote viewers who saw the structures on the far side of the moon had they generally determined that it's us or them?
No, the guy that did the best part, I'm at a loss now. What was his name? Do you remember? The guy that was originally involved in the Stanford University.
Oh no, I know absolutely nothing about remote viewing. You are my first introduction to the concept of remote viewers.
I'll remember his name in just a second. He wrote a book called Penetration, and he was quite specific about the stuff that he remote viewed for a secret government agency. And he saw all the stuff that we saw, and they included giant bridges that appeared to go nowhere. In other words, it looked like a bridge, but then it would stop halfway.
And what was covering it? What was covering the other half of the bridge?
Something may have been covering, but he saw giant equipment, giant what appeared to be lighting fixtures, all kinds of interesting stuff, and just more or less confirmed what Ron and I had seen.
Wasn't he the one, though, the Penetration, wasn't that the book that is selling on eBay for like $800?
Yeah. Amazon.com, I think it's upwards of $400 or $500 for a copy, and I got one and read it, and it was just enthralling to read that this guy was seeing it, and this was, I think he wrote the book in the late 80s about some remote viewing he had done in 1976. And so, we're talking about stuff that he had remote viewed 30 years ago, and we were just finding out about it.
Oh my goodness! Now, see, this is just
put it up on my image program and seeing, and it was, of course, a picture of the backside of the moon, and just remember how exciting it was to see the city there. I mean, it was absolutely obvious that there was buildings. There was giant tubes. There was what I call the spaceport, just all kinds of things, and it was just fascinating to see those kind of things. So then I started taking all the pictures of the far side of the moon and scanning them and sending them to Ron and yourself. And the one photo that's a very famous photo taken Lunar Orbiter 1 on one of its first passes on the backside of the moon, and seeing all these mining areas. I mean, there was roads and equipment and things spraying dust all over. And then Ron found the control tower, and just obvious. It was really an exciting time.
Now, Ron said something about the camera that took these original photographs, especially the one of Copernicus that you had. It had a special additional resolution where you could see vast distances without pixelization in the image. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, these were just straight negatives. There was no, they didn't use digital cameras in those times.
Right, there was not such a thing as a pixelization.
Right. So what we did is we could zoom in as far as we wanted and see as much as we wanted. And what NASA did in those times, they couldn't mess around with the digital portion of the photographs. So what they had to do was airbrush. And what they did when they wanted to cover something up is they put on what they call white ejecta. And that was a white material that they claimed was ejecta coming out of the moon, covering certain areas.
And that would be mostly around like craters and those long white rays from the crater center?
Right.
Okay, yeah.
And that's all that is NASA covering up the cities. But because they weren't really adept at it, and because they had no idea in the late 60s that 40 years or 30 years later, 35 years later, that the average public would have imaging programs that could go right to that stuff. And when he found the bucket wheel excavator, which was as clear as a bell on that Copernicus photograph that I obtained from NASA, that was really it. And then Skeptic Overlord from Above Top Secret was the one that pointed out that the whole north face of the Copernicus crater looked exactly like a strip mine, which it does.
Okay, now that, just to clarify for the audience, Above Top Secret is abovetopsecret.com. It's a website on the internet where you can go and discuss various issues, political, fringe, scientific, religious, and they try to maintain a fairly serious environment. And that's where we all met to discuss these topics originally, and that's what John was referring to. Anyway, so Ron Zorkan was the one who pointed this out to you originally.
He was the one. He was the one that I posted the photographs, and they were posted through the owners of Above Top Secret. I had mentioned that I had these photos, and they were too big to send over the internet, and so I mailed them by CD. And they put 5 of these photographs that I obtained from NASA up, and they're extremely clear. They were sent to me probably by accident, because they were sent to me in the original Lunar Orbiter format. Lunar Orbiter, as you know, was the series of 5 satellites that we sent to the moon between 1966 and 1967 in order to survey the landing spots that Apollo was expected to land. And what they needed is very high resolution so that they could see exactly where Apollo might land. And so they took thousands of photographs, and they have released them to the public in various different formats. But the original format that was processed on the spacecraft itself was 16 by 20 negative. And I ordered one of these, or I ordered 5 of them from NASA, and one of them was the crater Copernicus. And when I got this, I expected, a positive and maybe, 8 by 10 or something like that. But what I got was a 16 by 20 inch negative, and this was like in 98 or 99, 1998 or 1999, and I had no way, and there was no way in Las Vegas to print a 16 by 20 negative. So it took a few years before the technology was to the point where somebody could actually show me a print. I got that done, I think, in 2003, when the technology got that far in Las Vegas, I could see a print, and I looked at this thing, and it was fantastic. I mean, there was obvious plumes of vapor or smoke. There was a house or building. There was all kinds of little things. And so I had that photograph for, maybe a couple of years. And then finally, I decided to put it on the web at Above Top Secret. And the photograph that I'm talking about was Lunar Orbiter, and I forget the number, but it was scanned in 4 different sections so that we could get the maximum resolution as possible. And when that went on Above Top Secret, first there was a little bit of skepticism, but then Ron and a few others started finding an amazing amount of artifacts. They found buildings, they found the bucket wheel excavator, they found other buildings, they found all kinds of things. It was really exciting. I think this happened in September of 2006, and it went along there. Everybody was finding all kinds of things. And then I remember December 4th was my birthday. I was 64 years old, and this was just a few months ago. And I remember the date because I thought, I remember sitting at my desk, and I had an old NASA book called, it was SP-246, and it was Lunar Orbiter Photos, or it was photos of Apollo 8, 10, and 11. And I thought, I wonder, those photographs were taken before NASA really got into its mode of airbrushing everything out so the public couldn't see what was on there. And so I remember taking the one photo, and I think it was Lunar Orbiter 1 2089, I'm not sure which one it was, put it in the scanner, scanned it, and put I'm doing great. It's a beautiful evening in Las Vegas, and I'm getting ready to go up to the mine tomorrow.
Ah, the mine. Now, what is this mine?
It's a little gold mine I started about 10 years ago. It had been worked for the last 100 years. It's just a small little operation, but it keeps me out of the bars.
Are you mining helium-3 over there?
I wish.
Yeah, be your own helium-3 baron, as Ron Zorgon puts it.
Yeah, I wish.
Go ahead. Hey, there?
It'd be nice if I was it had helium-3, but no, it's a little gold mine and should be producing any week now.
Producing gold?
Right, it's a little gold mine.
Just a little one. And how do they go about mining for gold these days? Is it more advanced than it used to be?
There's two ways. Number one is underground and open pit, and ours is open pit. In other words, we just go in from the top and scoop up the ore, and we separate the good ore from the bad ore. We take the good ore up to the mill site and crush it, and then it's mixed in a ball mill in a kind of a slurry, and then it goes across what they call a woofer table, which shakes. It has little rills, and it shakes the heavy concentrate into a little fine lime that goes into a bucket, and then there's two things you can do with the concentrate. You can either sell that or you can refine it. I elected not to get a permit to refine it because it's just too expensive and takes a lot of chemicals, so we're just going to be selling the concentrate.
Now, I'm assuming, based on your experience with the mine there, it's in Nevada, correct?
Right.
That you recognize the equipment, the view of what that equipment might look like maybe from an airplane.
That's correct.
Yeah, so this kind of leads us all to your original photographs of anomalies in the Copernicus crater on the moon.
That's right, and I didn't really realize what we had found until Ron Zorgon, the infamous Zorgon, came along and started finding the equipment.